April was such a great reading month that there was just no way that May was going to live up to it. So what I like to do to avoid book hangovers is to completely switch genre. So what I did this month is I read exclusively non-fiction. This wasn't entirely intentional at the time, but I think it was a really good idea and I've got a lot out of it. I'm also trying to kind of slow down my reading a little bit at the moment, partly because audiobooks are getting quite expensive, the number that I've been getting through at least, and I like to spend a little bit more time kind of mulling over some of the things that I've been listening to as well. The first book was Stuffication, Living More with Less by James Walton. I'm moving out of this flat at the end of July. It turns out I've accumulated quite a bit of stuff over the past, well, 2 years that I've been in the UK at least. I came over here with only one suitcase, so it's kind of amazing how things have tumbled out of control a little bit. As I do have a tendency to stay in one flat for sort of no more than a year, it does make sense for me to have fewer possessions. So I've been reading and listening around this topic quite a bit. Stuffication is more kind of sociological and psychological side of stuff and consumerism. It's quite a broad approach to it. So it's not just the life-changing magic of tidying up, it's kind of the why and how we got to this point and all those kinds of things. Warman explores the different effects on our minds and on our bodies and, like I said, how we actually got to consuming as much as we do. He looks at the extremes and then comes up with a somewhat more moderate solution to the over-consumerist stuffication. Following this more moderate approach, I read one that was less moderate, and that is a memoir. It's called Everything That Remains by Jonathan Fields Milburn, and he is one of the minimalists. It's primarily by Joshua Fields Milburn, but there are little interjections from Ryan Nicodemus, who is the other minimalist, and that gives it quite a lot of character and personality. So I really like that aspect of it. I was a bit disappointed that it wasn't read by them themselves. It's narrated by somebody else, just because I've been listening to their podcast as well. But this book, rather than being an exploration in the same way that Stuffication is, it's about his personal journey, or their personal journeys, and the way that that's changed their life. So they're kind of leading by example. This is probably the best place to start with the output from the minimalists. I started with the podcast. I've been aware of them for a long time, but I haven't really dived into it in this same way. So that's been really, really interesting. There is a lot of overlap between the stuff that's in the podcast and in the book as well. So if you're a regular to the podcast, do be aware of that. You will be hearing stuff that you've already heard, but it's put together in a different sort of way. In a similar vein, the next book is also about this idea of living more with less and this kind of simple life. This one is The No Spend Year, How I Spent Less and Lived More. This is by Michelle McGann, and the author spent 1 year not spending anything on anything that wasn't essential. So she covered her bills, things like her rent, and she had a small budget for food shopping, but she did minimise her grocery shopping significantly. So it shows how she found free entertainment, how she cycled everywhere. She lives in London, so I thought this was really, really impressive, because cycling in London is something that I just would not do because it's terrifying. And it also shows how she kind of improvised when things went wrong, when anything broke and she needed something new. It also gives you a breakdown of how much she saved and how much she managed to lop off of her mortgage because she'd saved so much money. And it does go into quite a bit of depth there if that's something that you're interested in. Throughout the book, she's constantly struggling with this balance between living a sort of interesting and creative life and sort of improvising a lot, and this feeling of missing out. There are lots of tricks and tips throughout this book that I will be applying to my own life, especially in trying to pay off some of my student loan. So if that is the kind of thing that you find interesting, then I would really recommend reading this book. While none of this information is new, it is interesting to hear different people's perspectives. So the next audiobook that I listened to was Stephen King's On Writing, and this is part memoir and part kind of writing manual. Now, I should start by saying that I have not read any of Stephen King's books, and I'm also not a writer. I still really enjoyed this book and I got a lot from it because a lot of the things that he's talking about are applicable to any creative field. So you can kind of tease out different bits of advice and apply them to whatever you do. The main advice is once you find that thing, do it, and do it every day. Then I read a physical book, and this one I'm really excited about because I'm actually doing an interview with the author and illustrator, and I'm doing this as a video interview for Spine magazine. And this is The Girl Guide by Marawa Ibrahim, and it's illustrated by Siman Erkaz. This comes out on the 1st of June. I was really lucky and got my hands on it a bit early because I work in a bookshop. This is a book about growing up and what it is like to be a woman in the modern age. So this kind of reads like advice from a big sister. I wish this had been around when I was sort of 11, 12. It's a really good introduction to the world of being a woman. It's got lots of great advice from a feminist perspective and just the basics like periods and bras and all those fun things. It also includes things like menstrual cups, which I never saw anything on in more traditional growing up type books. Talks about the tampon tax, which is something that you better not get me started on because it makes me very angry. And while this doesn't go into a lot of depth about the LGBT side of things, it does at least acknowledge it, which again was something that was very much lacking in books of this type when I was growing up. The other thing that is absolutely great about this is how beautiful the inside is. I mean, look at this. These were all made out of paper and collage and things, so I can't wait to interview them and find out a bit more about what actually went into creating this. The cover here is all lettered by Marawa herself in different poses, which I thought was really neat. And yeah, I will be asking them about the process of making that as well. So keep an eye out for that video. Finally, I listened to the audiobook of Deep Work by Cal Newport. This is kind of a business, kind of a psychology, kind of a self-help book, I guess. And it's about the importance and the rareness of something called deep work. Newport describes deep work as being sort of like being in a flow state when you're doing any sort of work, especially something like writing or designing, but it's the stuff that really requires your full cognitive attention, and it's really mentally taxing stuff. So it's about how difficult that is to find in a world where we are constantly being interrupted and there are just so many distractions, so many other things that we could be doing other than deep work. The first part kind of looks at why deep work is important and also why it's so rare, and then the second part gives you quite a lot of practical advice about how to sort of develop a deep work habit yourself. That's things like creating daily rituals and habits around deep work and cutting out that time in your daily schedule, running away from the world and going and living in a cabin in the woods for X amount of time and just really focusing on a single project. He uses the example of J.K. Rowling finishing the final Harry Potter book, and that she would book into the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh and she would just focus on the book, and partly because she was spending so much money to book out this hotel, that was an extra motivator for her to really work on this single thing. He also looks at different business people and creatives who have done this kind of thing and different tactics that have worked. As this is something that I'm really trying to apply to my own work, I found this really interesting. In fact, I'm in the process of listening to it for a second time because I think there are some nuggets in there that I kind of want to be able to note down as I'm listening to it. So this month has been very non-fiction heavy. The only fiction that I have read is a reread of Robin Hobb's Fool's Assassin, which is the first in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is the final trilogy about Fitz and the Fool. The third book of this trilogy has just come out, and I'm very excited about it, but I want to really enjoy and appreciate it. What I've been doing is rereading the others that come before, so I'm currently on the first one but nearly onto the second one, and yeah, so I can really refresh myself on what's going on in this world. Anyway, that's all that I have for the non-fiction month of May. If you want to find me elsewhere online, I am Holly Dunn Design on Twitter and Instagram. My online portfolio is also hollydundesign.com. I've got links to all of those as well as my Goodreads page down below if you want to see what I've been reading. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!